the last question. Where do you stand? There are some like Ibo Mandaza who argue for the National Transitional Authority. I am sympathetic to that as a way of moving us from where we are, including Tendai Biti. There are some who view that as a coup itself because it means suspension of the constitution to allow a transitional authority to come in. For you as a lawyer, where do you stand regarding the transitional authority as a way of giving a sabbatical to the nation and allowing the nation to put in places structures to move the nation forward? Where do you stand with that?
Well, the difficulty with that would be the constitutional framework under which it would be introduced. So you can have it provided you get the buy-in of the political class and then, of course, of the people. Now we're at a stage where that can happen, where because the tension coming from Cap 3 completely shows that the government side is no longer concerned about, running the country within a constitutional order. Clearly, they are now adamant that they don't want to give up power under any circumstances. So they have now disqualified themselves from being a government or from running governmental affairs. But on the other hand, the country really requires some movement towards a situation where we have credible, free and fair elections. And this is who is in charge of the country pending that happening. So there should be room for that discussion, but you need to address how it is.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Wonderful.
Represent His Excellency the President, Dr. Emerson Damson Mnangagwa, who sent me to represent you in person and to represent our country for the inauguration of President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, his 7th term here in Kampala. We do go to member states of the AU when they have such ceremonies, like especially inauguration after the elections, to see the level of advancement a country would have achieved, and as we would have achieved as African countries. Because remember, we had our the AU from OAU has been developing since 1963 when it was formed. And then when it was formed, it had only very few countries that were independent from the colonial masters. By then, some were former colonies of the French, some were Spaniards, some were German, some were Britain, like in our case, some were Portuguese. So the African countries came together to form the Organization of African Unity, which later translated into the AU. And each period of time, they gave themselves objectives to meet, principles to meet. And this is what we also learn as Zimbabwe, to see what other countries have achieved, and to learn from the way they might have done their things, and then do better, at home. For instance, you might recall that way back in the 60s, Africa declared that the entire African continent had to be independent, had to be liberated. Those were the main objectives until the liberation of the last country on the continent, South Africa. Thereafter, we were now giving ourselves objectives to meet for our development. For instance, in 1981, there was the Banjul Declaration, which was done in the Gambia on the human rights, on corporate governance, and so, African countries, the 54 as we are, they wanted to see, we wanted to see how we are achieving that objective. Later on, the African heads of states again sat down and gave themselves the way they should govern themselves by way of having elections, and that declaration was done in Nairobi, in Addis Ababa, 1987. Was it 2007? Not 87, 2007. So every, these things would have been discussed at various levels by the officials until it gets to the heads of states. So they agreed on the election and how we should, how we should develop our own democracy as African countries. Then 2013, which is known by everyone, then the African heads of states came up with the Agenda 2063 to say, how should Africa be like? Of course, majority of us will not be there, but these are set objectives that whoever comes in will say, what do we want Africa to be like in 2063, the agenda. So by coming here now to see what has happened and their inauguration, which we are going to see pretty soon, we are learning on how the different parts of our continent are developing in terms of their democracy. Last year, we're in Tanzania, and the previous year we're in Nigeria, to see how they were doing so. And also we do send our electoral commissions to the various countries as they hold their elections to see how they do and where we can learn ourselves and how we can do better. And so that's why I'm here. So there are quite a number of countries, heads of states, some represented at my level, some at prime minister, some have sent their delegations at ministerial level, to come to see how far Uganda is gone.
Happy Mother's Day to everyone. I know I did not get a chance to pass my regards this past weekend, but here we are. I just want to send you some love and light to all the mothers. You are such beautiful people. You don't know how much it means to me. I've seen some of your comments, your prayers. Thank you. Appreciate you deeply. To those that have joined me for the first time, my name is Rombi. Please subscribe to the channel, like, comment respectively, and I'll see you on the other side. Stick around.
We were always committed to ensuring that there is political dialogue, there is political tolerance, there is reform in the country, which we hope we have achieved under him in a limited manner. Now that was impossible. Now we are fighting on our own.
Tell me, you've been presidential candidate twice, have you?
Yes.
What lessons have you learned from being a presidential candidate? Are there any one or two lessons that you've gotten out of that exercise?
Yes, there's a lot of, I think the most important lesson I've got from being a presidential candidate is that ZANU-PF never allows a real, free and fair election. That the things that we would discover right at then elections are won by ZANU-PF on the basis of cutting corners, not following the law, and so on. And that participation meant that ultimately, the only way we can actually deliver change through an election is we have to undertake massive electoral reform.
Are any of those lessons, can they be used in any way to strengthen the formal opposition?
Yes, they would have. I think in the formal opposition now, people realize they've been talking about reform, but the problem which we are making ourselves, they're also making, is that at the last minute we go into elections without these reforms. I think that now the way we have been fighting with CAB 3 is the way we should fight for real, genuine electoral reforms, so that you have a transparent election process. The current situation came from the opposition, although it's not acknowledged, where you vote in one day. We used to have 2 days of voting and then ballots transported during the night. That was changed at the instance of the forces that we did when we were civil society, and then the MDC on its own. Then you also have the polling station results. All those came from. So we need more of that, especially the fact that results must be announced at the polling station. In other words, when a vote has taken place, we must have the media there with an official there saying, this is whatever, so Hague Primary School.
These are the votes cast for A, B, C, D.
For the candidates, so that everyone is also taking down in their home.
It's transparent.
Then when you say we are transmitting, I mean, there's something else, you can do that, but let a vote, so that a vote never changes once it has been announced, etc. They are refusing such kind of, and I don't know why. If you have finalized a vote and you've signed onto it, let it be announced.
But the Prof, as we run towards the end of our conversation, which I've thoroughly enjoyed, the opposition is not clean in all this, Prof. Right now, you are talking, standing out quite courageously, and we commend that. Tendai Biti sat where you are sitting and has been assaulted, has been arrested. Fadzai Here was heckled and had to run away from the sports center. Could the opposition have done this differently? Point number one. Point number two, how does the opposition, the formal opposition, Zimbabweans want an opposition. Zimbabweans are ready, like you said, but there isn't the formal opposition to represent Zimbabweans. First question, could the opposition, the formal opposition, have done things differently in opposing CAB 3? And how do we move forward as far as opposition is concerned?
Okay, thank you. I agree that the opposition could have done differently. I think we should have come together first. We knew, of course, even before all these, the kind of persons who were opposing this, we could have come together, get some umbrella framework and do it as one united front. This is what we are now trying to do. But we should have done it better.
Why didn't we do it? What's the problem? Is it an ego thing? The ego economics of the opposition? Talk to me about that. Why can't you guys come together and form a credible opposition that represents the majority of Zimbabweans, from Binga to Cholocho to Kezinkai to Chiredzi, wherever?
Okay, I think the problem was not so much ego. I think we had been outmaneuvered. The persons were doing the CAB thing had long ahead then created some differences that would be very difficult, because remember, they wanted to win the opposition over to their side. So by the time CAB 3 came, the opposition was already in disarray. So as we then stood to oppose it, we didn't know who exactly is on the same side. Only then, so we had to discover who was on our side after we had spoken. So we could not have started the other way. They did it very well. I mean, those who are opposing us. So you only discover that, okay, Tendai is on this side. Like you could have guessed some people, Fadzai here and other space before, but it was only after we had then stood our different grounds that we realized that these are our
comrades.
So now we had to do it that way. You could not assume that because someone was opposition, they necessarily were in opposition to CAB 3, just we have seen. Now going forward, we have no option but to have to work together. Now,
in your view, Prof, as we conclude, what should the opposition look like? what should Zimbabwean opposition like in your view? What's the ideal situation?
Well, I think the ideal situation for an opposition here is to have a movement that is very broad-based, and then that brings together all real talented individuals around with a recognizable leadership that comes in, and that is opposing ZANU-PF toe to toe, but with an alternative set of economic policies, particularly economic, social policies that are set out clearly in terms of the agenda. That has been lacking for a very long time. So it would be, a group that is identifiable as such, which is one, identifiable leadership committed, but with well-publicized the social and economic programs that will be introduced should they get in the power.
The last question, where do you stand? There are some, like Ibu Mandaza, who argue for the National Transitional Authority. I'm sympathetic to that as a way of moving us from where we are, including tenability. There are some who view that as a coup itself because it means suspension of the constitution to allow a transitional authority to come in. For you as a lawyer, where do you stand regarding the transitional authority as a way of giving a sabbatical to the nation and allowing the nation to put in places structures to move the nation forward? Where do you stand with that?
Well, the difficulty with that would be the constitutional framework under which it would be introduced. So you can have it provided you get the buy-in of the political class and then, of course, of the people. Now we're at a stage where that can happen, where because the tension coming from Cape 3 completely shows that the government side is no longer concerned about running the country within a constitutional order. Clearly, they are now adamant that they don't want to give up power under any circumstances. So they have now disqualified themselves from being a government or from running governmental affairs. But on the other hand, the country really requires some movement towards a situation where we have credible, free and fair elections. And this is who is in charge of the country pending that happening. So there should be room for that discussion, but you need to address how it is.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Wonderful.